All right, welcome back, family. Come on in. So today we have Shifu Loretta, and I always want to mess up your last name, so I'm not going to actually use your last name. I'll let you pronounce it for us later. But anyway, Shifu Loretta is one of the Tai Chi women in the world that I have met, and not very many. And I tell you what, she just stood out to me in such a phenomenal way when I met her. And once I started to learn more about her and what she had done and what she's still doing and what she could offer, it was like, we got to get together on our little talk show and have her come on here and just show people how Tai Chi is not just a martial art, not that it's not a great thing as a martial art, but that there's so much more to it. And with her being so directly tied, very close to I say the origin of the culture, because she was the assistant of a very well-known Tai Chi master, and she'll tell you about that as well. She got some gems that she experienced that some of us may not have a clue in regards to that. So here we have it today, Shifu Loretta. Thank you.
Thank you, Lester. Thank you, Shifa Lester. So good to see you. So good to see everyone. And it's just so wonderful that, we all looked at like online and how that was hard on Tai Chi, but in some ways it's wonderful that it can just reunite us like this and just get the word out. It's wonderful.
That's very true. So we're here at CCH 360. We're on a mission to spread the arts, the various aspects of the arts. And it's myself here as well as Dan Tracy and also Pam Dye. The three of us work together, and we've been having people such as yourself and other guests as well come on and just share a little bit about one of the things I wanted to ask you is what drew your interest originally? Because I know it changes over time, and you've been at it for a while. But what initially got you drawn into such a, I say, kind of mystical art form?
Well, I think that's actually rooted in my childhood. Um, hmm. When I was a kid, I was very curious and I was very interested in, it's weird. I think really, well, my aunt is Japanese. My family are immigrants from Germany, but my aunt is immigrant from Japan. And she kind of always got me interested a little bit more about that Eastern thought and Eastern culture. So I think that seed was always planted at a young age. And then I did things like I was supposed to do ballet. I had a very classical upbringing. I was supposed to do ballet. I was supposed to, learn how to play the flute and piano and all these things. If I had private lessons, I had to do very well in school, all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to really learn martial arts. I was intrigued by it. I liked that you could do something with it. It's not just pretty or, of course it is, but I liked that it was practical.
Mm.
And I liked that it had some kind of philosophy behind it. So even at a young age, I was kind of intrigued by it, but I wasn't allowed to do it because, girls are not supposed to do things like karate and all that kind of thing in a very traditional family upbringing, very sort of strict European upbringing. And then I just kept getting interested in it. And then when I finally went to college, I studied jujitsu, and it was just because I happened to see that there was a fair that they were doing, and they were demonstrating the different clubs, and I thought, oh, it's Japanese, that's interesting, and they have supposedly a traditional lineage, and I was very fascinated with that, so I joined that, but I sustained a knee injury,
Mm.
and at that time, we didn't have really good things like MRI technology. We didn't have a lot of that back then. This was in the early 90s, let's just say, maybe early 90s. We didn't even have cell phones, okay? So the doctor basically told me to just stay off of it and not do anything for about 6 months. And that just made me stir crazy because I wanted to do something physical and I wanted to do and I, to let off steam and take care of myself and deal with stress from college and all that. And I just didn't like it. And I heard of Tai Chi. Back then, Tai Chi was so obscure. Even in a big college, I went to Rutgers. Even in a big college, it was very obscure still back then. Nobody really knew much about Taoism or what is Tai Chi, and I read about it in the library. There was no way you could search online. That didn't exist. And I heard about it's this martial art, but it's also a healing art. And I was like, this really intrigued me. And it intrigued me. I was studying Zen Buddhism at the time. I belonged to a group that was doing meditation. And I just, I don't know, this whole thing of the Taoism just intrigued me. And, so then, long story short, I found somebody who taught Tai Chi. And then I tried a little bit of that and so on and so forth. And I went back home for the summer. That summer I went back home. Usually I would stay and I would work at the university and rent an apartment. But I went back home to Vernon, New Jersey, where I live. That's in Sussex County. And New Jersey comes to a point like that in the north. And it was the northernmost county that bordered New York State. And I thought, oh, I really want to do something. Maybe I'll start karate now, or something. And I went in my phone book, my parents' phone book, and I was looking under martial arts schools. And in the tiniest little font, it said Tai Chi Farm.
Mm.
And I knew this place on Route 94, right over the border past Vernon, New Jersey, where I lived. I knew it existed, but I always thought it was like a hippie farm or like where they just grew fruit or something.
Right.
I didn't know anything about it. And I thought, really, they teach? And so I called up and some volunteer answered the phone and yes, and so on and so forth. And that's how I found my teacher. And I was just blown away. He was drawing things in the ground. He was showing me what is Chan Tzu Ching. And he was just really get stuff I didn't hear ever before in any Tai Chi class that I had or anything that I read. And it was just, and I'm like, there's this Chinese man in the middle of nowhere on this Tai Chi farm who's, and he's written books and he's doing all this stuff and he's teaching these classes. And it just, and that's how it all started.
Right. So how do you pronounce your teacher's name again?
Tsung Haw.
Right. And he wrote
Yeah,
the
that's
Tao of Tai Chi, right?
sorry.
I think one of his books is the Tao of Tai Chi.
Yes, the Tao of Tai Chi Chuan. Yes, the Tao of
Right.
Tai Chi Chuan, Tao of meditation, Tao of I Ching. Yeah. And from doing that Tai Chi, that healed my knee.
Mm.
And later on, when I went to grad school, I was diagnosed with very bad colitis, ulcerative colitis, they thought it was Crohn's disease. And I was extremely sick. And that's because I started slacking on my practice and I was just, like eating McDonald's and
Mm.
cereal. That's what I lived off of. And I had to cut all that out, and I went back to my Tai Chi and my teacher showed me some self massage and Qigong and all that. And it cured it.
Mm.
It cured it.
You're soul for sure then.
And so even though I was interested originally in the martial aspect, I was blown away by the healing ability of it too, and it's like two sides of the same coin, the knowledge that you need for hurting an opponent, for rendering them unable to hurt you. On the flip side of that, you use that same knowledge, you can use it for healing. It's how you apply it to yourself or someone else.
Mm.
It's really just it's yin and yang.
Right. The intent of it, right?
Yeah.
So I'll ask you one more question, then I'll pass the microphone. So currently, what is your focus now dealing with the arts? What's your focus? Like, do you have like a long-term goal that you're working on, a plan or anything like that?
I plan to live a long time.
Yeah.
Let's see if it works. Okay. But I have shifted all my school online, whereas before it was on person, and that's, with the whole COVID thing and all that, everybody went online. And my students actually got to like it. And I became, I think, pretty proficient at teaching online because it's different than teaching in person, but I have an ergonomics background. That was my research background. And I actually could apply it to the Tai Chi. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand it. Now it takes a little time and we're still settling some things because I moved and we had a lot of life changes here. Um, but that's something I plan to do, is just really expanding my online school.
Mm.
I love it because I had people from all over the world join my basic level of online school,
Right.
and I realized, wow, I can have people from Australia, I can have people from Canada, people from Argentina, people from everywhere, Europe, America, anywhere. It's very easy to
Right.
get them together. So I want to create more of an open forum for that. That's one of my goals, and to really get that back. I'm probably going to do the Tai Chi Gala again, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So those are some of my goals. I'm going to write another book probably. Um, we'll see.
So one more question, just to piggyback off of your classes online. So your online classes, are you focused on pre-recorded or are you doing live sessions?
I have both. I
Oh,
have the pre-recorded where they can also contact me with questions. That's my very basic level. And then I have my students that I carried over from when I taught in New Jersey.
gotcha.
Yeah, and so that's the one I also want to expand, and that takes a little sort of engineering on how to make that work because of different time zones and when, do people come in at different times, but then this person's advanced and this person's beginner. So, that's something I'm really kind of working on right now.
Yes, I got you. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I when I went online and looked at your website, Loretta, it was just almost endless. It's just very neat that you've done all that already. Um, and my first question, I guess, is who do you go to now for your answers?
That's a great question. Um, I do a lot of what my teacher did. So I took a lot of notes when I studied with him, and luckily I asked him quite a few questions, and I'm so glad I did. If I have questions now, a lot of it I try to research on my own because that's what he did. And that's what Shan Sun Feng did, the legendary founder of the Tai Chi systems. And I will also look at what do other people do in related arts. So I will also look at the other Neijia arts like Xing Yi Chuan and Baguazhang and those
Hmm.
arts. And I kind of like, what are they doing that's similar? Because I'm really good at seeing patterns. And that's one thing that, I can use to help me get an answer. And then I'll sometimes go online. Um, and I'm also very blessed and lucky that I got to study with Dr. Painter, for example, Bagua expert from Texas, when he used to piggyback his event on the end of the Tai Chi Gala, the Chanson Film Festival that my teacher started. And
Hmm.
so I was really lucky. And because his stuff really works, and especially for martial arts, and he will always answer your questions. So, I try to find people like that. I look at what they do. I watch. I do think of actual physics and anatomy when I do things, and then I relate it back sometimes to Chinese medicine or Chinese thought, energy work, things like that. Because I believe that there's no division between Western and Eastern thought. There's no division between physics and metaphysics. I think that they are at other ends of the pole, but there's a point where they intersect. And so I try to really look at that when and it depends on the question too. Is it a very physical thing? Is it a technique thing? Is it a historical thing? Is it a Chinese energy thing? Is it an acupressure thing? I try to look at all those things, and then that's how I come to my answer. So it's usually a big research project, but I usually get a quality answer when I do that. So
You're a certified a masseuse or massage therapist, and I know that relates directly. But in your words, how does that relate to the your Tai Chi and your growth?
oh yeah. Um, that was one thing I did was I was also interested in therapeutic massage. And it's because it's very hands-on and it's very much into anatomy and physiology, but it's also looks at the energetic side. And it allowed me to understand a lot about the human body while also helping people. Um, so you can you can really understand how the body is put together if you study anatomy and you do deep tissue work, for example. You can also understand how to really find energy acupoints when you have to do it on someone else, do it on yourself and do it on
Mhm.
someone else. And you can see their reaction to it. It's really interesting. So it gives you such a fertile groundwork So whatever seeds you're trying to plant, you've got this really good fertile groundwork to understand it from a very hands-on point of view. And it's what I tell my students. I know that this is going to sound kind of, pardon me for sounding a little, I don't know if it's gory or whatever, but I call it the Hannibal Lecter principle. You know Hannibal Lecter, right? From Silence of the Lambs, that movie. It's
Mhm.
not a very pleasant movie, but the main part of this movie was he was what? He was a surgeon, right? He was a psychiatrist, but he was a doctor, and he also had this background of anatomy and physiology because you know you go to med school, you got to dissect the body, right? Um, and so, but he was evil, right? He used his knowledge not to help people, but to harm. So it's like what I just said before, and I'm going to reiterate it. I call it the Hannibal Lecter principle. If you know very well how to heal, like if you understand, you know, for example, I don't go by when I massage someone, you know, don't go to underneath the scalene area too far over here because you're going to hit the brachial plexus. And then, you know, that could, if you're doing deep tissue work, that could paralyze their arm, right? That's the healing. And knowing that if they have an impingement there, that could be why they're feeling something that, you know, thoracic outlet syndrome, it feels like carpal tunnel, but it's not, you know, so if we unimpinge this, we get, yeah, that same knowledge though, if I'm fighting, you know, and I have a stick or something like a kubotan or a knife,
Mhm.
I know right away where to put it on someone to make sure they can't hurt me, right? As self-defense. So it's like this, everything you learn, same thing with DMOC, you know, a the poison points, right? If you understand, like you come in there with force and you go against the flow of meridian and you do it at this certain aggressive way, well, that point you also know how to locate now for healing, right? If you understand, so it's like that's why I think that a lot of the Chinese masters and systems of either healing and martial arts, that's why I think they were sometimes kept very secret, even the healing systems, because sometimes people, you know, they're like, oh, well, that's old bourgeois Chinese thinking. Well, because if you really understand the body and all these delicate things and you know stuff and for healing, if you're not a very nice person or if you have to use it in a martial situation and you are a nice person, you can use it for hurting. See, so that's what that background really gave me, and I was just amazed at how it's really the yin and the yang. It's two sides of the same coin. So that's why I really benefited greatly from learning hands-on healing work, and it really helps
Mhm.
your understanding of martial work as well. And you
That's
gain
very
respect
important.
for it. Yeah, and you get a real deep respect for it, you know, because you realize that, you know, this knowledge that people have like that, wow, it's serious. It's very serious. So you really get a respect for it, I think.
Um, if you looking back in your career, would you do anything different?
Hmm. Um, yeah, I think so. As far as career, um, one thing that we all hate to do, we treat it like Victorians treat a lot of hedonistic things like sin, right? Okay. Um, Marketing and business. Like if you're gonna make a career out of this, you have to deal with those evils. You have to, and you can't treat it like it's bad. You have to understand it's part of life. You can't treat it like it's you know, like this thing in my business and you know, nobody really wants to do it, but you have to reframe your thinking about that because that's the only way really people can find you and understand that the art you do has worth. So you don't even have to look at it like, oh, I'm promoting myself and pushing myself. What you're doing is actually you're promoting Tai Chi or Qigong or whatever. And that's important because that's all natural and it's very empowering. So that was the one thing I wish I had invested more time and energy into when I was younger. I think that would have helped a lot. And I don't like to do it. I'm also actually, even though I can speak comfortably with people, I'm really an introvert. You know, I don't like going out, reaching out to people. I don't like to have to like explain what I do and why it's good. I find that just, it's very uncomfortable. But I think that we need to understand that if we're going to do this as a career, we really need to take that into account.
Okay, so it's my turn. I find your following the master is very intriguing. Okay. Would you equate that apprenticeship to what they did in the old days, or is it something that you learned? This was just a way to learn the art.
Yeah, what happened was one day my teacher said, are you really serious about this? And if I pass on and this and that, will you remember these principles? Will you really be serious about your Tai Chi?
Mhm.
And I said, yes. And he said, it's very serious. So he said, we're going to do Bai Shi. So what he did was he brought me into his private practice studio. And there he had a sort of drawing, I guess you would call it, a scroll of Tan San Feng, who was considered the founder of Tai Chi, the father of Tai Chi. At least that's one theory in Chinese thought. And that's the one that my teacher followed. And so it's not like worship, but it's like a promise. So it's like as if the person was still alive, and we don't care about space and time, right? We make a promise. It's like you're making a promise to a person. So I would, I did the incense, and then we did, you would like an orange or some fruit. You like show that you're offering. It's just like you would invite a person in, and you're very serious when you want to make a promise to them. And so I took that promise, and it's something that I always have to remember. And there's times in my life, believe me, where I thought, man, that would be nice to just like drink a whole bunch of beer and eat a whole lot of pizza and just, like just forget about everything, or just forget about Tai Chi for a while and just live a good life, this kind of thing. And then I'd always remember my promise and what am I representing to myself and theoretically to any students I will get in the future. What am I representing? So that was really the promise I made. So it wasn't even just so much to my teacher, but it was more to the idea of what he represented and what he was trying to instill in me and what I try to instill in students too, and how he helped me, what things he would say and do, and how he would teach me, and how he would show me there was so many ways I could help myself or learn things, and then to kind of pass that on. So that's kind of what that all entailed. And I took it really seriously. I do take things like that quite seriously.
I imagine that you just carry his legacy on to your students as well.
Yeah. I teach them what he taught me and how he taught me. And one of his things, which I really appreciate, is to teach people how to think for themselves, to teach people to question. So a lot of that was usually not welcome. In the old styles, you wouldn't question your teacher. Now, you do it with respect, of course. You don't hassle them or put them on the spot. But I always tell my students, test things, try things, question things, ask me questions. If you go and you learn something from someone else, that's fine. You have my blessings. Try to see how it fits with the principles. Is it working? Does it make sense? Do you feel anything different? What are you noticing? So this was something that he really instilled in me. And I found that it was not only just efficacious, but I think it's necessary for any kind of growth or progress in the arts. Yeah.
Reading down your bio, you said you had an upcoming podcast, or you're thinking about doing a podcast. Maybe you can give us a little more information. When are you starting, or have you started? That kind of
I
thing.
haven't started it. I'm still putting it together because I have to hire someone to help me put all the logistics into place for the website, etc. And I'm still forming that out, but it should be this year. I can't guarantee when. I don't want to make a promise I can't keep. It's going to be all called Arcana Tea House, and it's really an offshoot from the Tai Chi. So while I am building my school and I want that to have its own development, I want to have something that's a little broader that goes from that idea that my teacher had to always research things and question things and look at all different things. So back in Chinese Tang Dynasty, Ming Dynasty, and these other dynasties, when they would have their tea houses, the people would gather, especially the men, they would gather and the scholars would gather and people would gather and have these wonderful discussions, or they'd play a game of Wei Qi, which is Go, basically. And they would talk about philosophy or new things or thoughts or philosophy or all this kind of just over, sort of like what the old fashioned coffee houses used to be, right? And I kind of want to bring that online. So I like doing Gong Fu Cha, which is a Chinese tea method. It's like tea ceremony, but it's really more like a method. And segue that into maybe interviewing people about very interesting topics. And that can range all the way from science and health to anti-aging, to martial arts, to Tai Chi, to Taoism, all these just things that people normally don't talk about mainstream. I would think that's very fascinating. And then it can go online where people can meet, just like we're doing now. I would have these open without passwords or whatever, this open tea house, basically, where people could do what we're doing and converse with each other. And several people could go into an online room and hang out, and there's going to be message boards and things like that. So I'm looking for that to just kind of keep people's minds open. And of course, my Tai Chi is not 100% going to dominate that. It's more like I'm going to let the people bring their thoughts, but it's just going to be on topics that we normally maybe don't hear about or get into. And yeah, I think that the Taoist thought will be a little bit what colors it, and kind of gives it the framework.
My last question. My students heard a rumor that the Tai Chi Gala was happening. Is
I
it a
am
rumor
trying.
or is it the planning?
Oh my gosh. I really want to put it back on. The problem is, and what people don't understand is, it's a huge financial risk for me. Huge. Because when you get a space, you have to guarantee them certain things. And you have to put down all this down payment that you're not going to get back if you can't deliver. So I would be doing it down here where I live now, more down south, probably around Tennessee, Georgia area. But I have to make connections and I have to research if people would even want to come down here, because this is kind of a new territory for me. But I'm just, I'm not going to be running around like I used to. I'm like 55 years old. I just don't want to be running up to Albany, running down here, running all over the highway. And I just really don't want to do that. And then where do I put my dog and all this kind of thing? So I want to do it, but I am not quite in the position yet where I can take that kind of a risk. So I'm trying to get it soon, but I can't guarantee you anything, unfortunately.
Oh,
Yeah, well, I was looking forward to the the gala myself, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was such a great gathering and some phenomenal practitioners and teachers there. I was just
yeah.
thinking maybe if there's some way you could line up the logistics so that you don't have to carry so much weight, but I would hate to see such a great event die.
Yeah, I'm going to try, but like I said, I have to find a place, and hotels, convention centers have skyrocketed in
Mhm.
fees like you would not believe. I mean, they have just really gone up. So, people are still expecting me to get them things where it's like $70 a night for a hotel room. And I just physically, I can't, it's just, it doesn't exist anymore. And
Yeah,
if I put people in a campground, then they're all going to gripe and complain. Well, we don't want outhouses. We want, I can't, like, so it's really hard. Plus,
yeah.
then, if I'm trying to provide for my presenters, it's really up there. So if I get like 50 people show up, I mean, that's the end of the event. So it's kind of like these logistics like that.
Well, yeah, I don't have a clue in regards to how you put together such a well organized event with such a great attendance. That was awesome. But if someone wants to follow up with you, get in touch with you, find out how to take lessons from you, how do they contact you?
They can contact me through my website, internalgardens.com. I do have a form on there, and they're always welcome to contact me at internalgardens@yahoo.com. So that's internal, spelled with an I, not an E, INTERNAL, gardens, GARDENS. All right, internalgardens@yahoo.com or internalgardens.com with the contact form. And I'd be very happy to, to answer whatever I can. I always love to hear from the community. So
And so you're offering Tai Chi online. Anything else?
currently, it's just my base class that I have with pre-recorded lessons, and then also their ability to question me on what they're learning.
Gotcha.
And then I have my live classes, which is something I'm still developing out because that's a little bit more complexity there, to just have somebody suddenly come in. I do also private lessons. I had something like 5 private lessons going on a regular basis. So online for a
Right.
while there. Yeah. So
Any social media platforms that you can be contacted on?
the social media is starting to burn me out.
Starting to do what?
Burn me out a little.
I get it.
I am on Facebook, but I don't really take it all that seriously. I kind of want to contact people. I'd rather do it just with email and then eventually straight through the website. But people are always welcome to contact me. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I have for you. And once again, we thank you here for coming and sharing with us. And we would definitely like to have you come back again. And maybe we can have one of your specific specialties as a topic, and we just dive a little deeper in something like that.
That would be my pleasure. Yeah. It's so great seeing all of you. I mean, I just love that. It's really great.
Yeah,
It was
likewise.
nice. It was nice. It was nice.